Hey everybody, how you doing? Look at us. Look at this nice little day. Well, it's not that nice. It's actually kind of overcast, but it's good for us. We're gonna do a little tour today, a little history recap of a neighborhood here in Brooklyn, the pretty neighborhood of Prospect Heights. Before we start, Cam, how are you?
Better than ever.
I believe you. For once, I believe you. But before we start, guys, you know the drill. Like and subscribe, all that. Get it out of the way now, man, so you can just kick back and, eat your peanut M&Ms or whatever. And also, oh yeah, check out the Patreon. Huge help, man. That's how I fund these things. That's how we're gonna grow. That's how you're gonna keep seeing stuff like this, man. Very important. It's a new world. But yeah, other than that, we're gonna cover all the history of Prospect Heights, man. A lot of culture, a lot of quaint beauty. All right, I'm rambling, man. I'm gonna get this thing started. Let's go. All right, so let's start at the beginning, huh? So the area we are in now used to be obviously used by the Native Americans, specifically the different Lenape tribes that inhabited this area. So a lot of times they would set up their homes and like wigwams and things closer to water sources, but these areas were used for hunting. They used to traverse the actual, grounds and whatnot. In fact, Flatbush Avenue, which we'll get into a little later, was one of those paths. But then this area was bought by two Dutchmen. One was Willem Kieft, and the other was Joris Janssen Rapelje, a little Dutchman. But Kieft should be in the Hall of Fame for New York, figures. He was a disaster of a director general for the Dutch West India Company, who started a war with the Native Americans that almost sunk the entire colony. And it was him who they replaced with Peter Stuyvesant because of his big, botched tenure. And he actually, interestingly enough, took a ship back to answer for all of his crimes, and he died in a shipwreck. It's crazy. He died in a shipwreck. Not enough people die in shipwrecks these days, and that's how I want to go. But he dies that way. Joris Janssen Rapelje was another guy who bought a lot of the land in this area, so those two kind of took a lot of land. And then they partitioned these things off. So, in fact, from Willem Kieft, a man named Gerrit Wolpertson bought a lot of the land here. And then, over time, these things get divided up. Now, we're talking like, a lot of time, because this was pretty much farms. East of Flatbush Ave was very undeveloped for a very long time. And keep in mind, because all this stuff was not that developed, there was a lot of like farms and bigger plots of land in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn was actually one of the highest concentrations of slaveholding in the colonies, man. It was up there with Charleston, South Carolina, and in places like Flatbush, it got up to as high as like 75% of people lived in a family that had at least one slave. That's insane, and it's a depressing thought. So here's a picture of my cat. In fact, this area here played a big role in the Battle of Long Island, which we've talked about in a million videos. I talked about in the Prospect Park video, talked about it a lot. Long story short, Washington got his ass handed to him and basically kind of gets pushed back all the way to where it's today, the Brooklyn Bridge. The British entered in through what is today like Verrazano Bridge area and pushed the entire Continental Army back, and it was near here at Cobble Hill, where Washington was on top of a hill, looking out and seeing everyone getting their asses handed to them. Here's a little picture of that. That's AI generated that. AI generated picture of Washington in a Knicks jersey, watching from his horse. There you go. That's what AI can do. And I'm actually standing here because of these two houses behind me. These are two of the older houses in Prospect Heights, 578, 580 Carlton, and they are kind of typical of what they would have been developing in the mid to second half of the 1800s, when east of Flatbush Ave, they started to kind of build this out. Don't be fooled though. Don't judge a book by its dust jacket. It's very fancy inside those houses. There ain't no one churning butter in there, I'll tell you that. Fancy little street of residential, and then we'll cover the other two strips here in a little bit. But yeah, these are 578, 580 Carlton. All right, so this here is the first major kind of path carved through this area. This dates back to the Native Americans. So Flatbush Avenue actually was a path used by the Native Americans inland, I guess. It got extended over to the water eventually for the ferries. It used to take you down to Flatbush, which is Flatbush, which, by the way, was the town of the 6 towns of Brooklyn from the 1600s that had the most slaves, unfortunately. I told you that already. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, here's a picture of my cat. Anyways, it's 10.5 miles. Today it goes all the way from basically the bridges down to the Rockaways. It takes you over Marine Parkway Bridge. It's a pretty major thoroughfare here in Brooklyn, probably like akin, better said, to Broadway, let's say, in Manhattan. It was extended to hit to the water and the bridge and all that stuff in 1898 when the actual consolidation went through. I've told you this a billion freaking times. 1898, consolidation of New York, the 5 boroughs. That happened in 1898. New York City grew exponentially, became the 2nd largest city in the world, behind only London at the time. You know, and think about the land too. Manhattan is the smallest of all the boroughs. Manhattan was New York City before consolidation. It's tiny, 22 square miles. Just to give you an idea, Queens is like 119 square miles. So it's a very, very big deal. I talk about it a lot. You got to remember this, baby. Consolidation, 1898. So yeah, that's what extended Flatbush from this area down here, where the park is, pretty much up to the water. Today, like I said, it goes 10.5 miles all the way to the Rockaways. Pretty cool. Okay, so now you need little thoroughfares for the neighborhood itself. We talked about Flatbush Avenue, but this here is Vanderbilt Avenue. Now, this was actually carved out in 1850, and it was supposed to be a route from Wallabout Piers up in what's today Brooklyn Navy Yard to basically a Prospect Park area. So this is kind of one of the main drags here. It's named after Cornelius Vanderbilt, huh? You know who that is, right, Cam? Huh? Do you know who he is? He's shaking his head. He's lying to me. Anyways, Cornelius Vanderbilt, you guys know, native son of Staten Island, started making his money in his early teens. He would row people into New York City, you know, and in teens, that's how he started making money. Then he got into shipping, then he got into trains, choo-choo after the Civil War. Yeah, he was a high achiever, and like his early teens already making money. One of those kids that every other kid hates because their parents keep bringing him up. They're like, why can't I be more like Cornelius, out there rowing people to New York City making money? But this area is named after him, and it took you down to the park. Not for nothing, also, Cornelius Vanderbilt, when he died, one of the richest men in United States history. Adjusted for inflation and like percentage of GDP and all that stuff, his fortune is estimated to be worth almost $200 billion today, which is actually less than some of the people who are around in present times, which makes you think. Back then, they were breaking up monopolies because people got too much money. Maybe they should start breaking up monopolies now. Huh? Look at the architecture, huh? Pretty architecture. But yeah, this is like the nice little strip with like restaurants and little coffee shops and all that stuff. But the only thing left for them to do to make this fancier is just abbreviate the name of Prospect Heights to like Prosp High, Pro High, and then jack up the rents. But it is nice around here. And yeah, you can see the brown street. So nice that they have a nice big historic district here. You can see the little brown street signs, which, by the way, if you're ever walking around them, is this something you point out to your little dates, everybody? Point out and be like, hey, brown street signs means we're in a landmark district, huh? Your date will love it so much that they'll call a taxi and leave the date, huh? And you know what? Who needs them if they can't appreciate good history, right? Okay, well, this is probably behind me, one of the bigger things to happen to this neighborhood, and well, to Brooklyn generally. Enough with the suspense. I'm standing in front of Prospect Park, 585 little acres here that were opened in 1867, designed by who, Cam?
Central Park guys.
That's the Central Park guys. Don't slight good old Calvert Vaux. It was Calvert Vaux and Frederick Law Olmsted, but they actually took over for a guy who was going to initially design. His name was Egbert Veal. Egbert Veal was actually, he helped survey what became Central Park, but his initial idea for this park was to include a lot of what is today Prospect Heights. But he had to go help during the old Civil War. You remember that little row that we got ourselves into? He had to go help during that, and then Vaux and Olmsted said, we don't need that other chunk. We're good with just this side of Flatbush Ave. What's interesting about that is that other side of Flatbush Ave, a little bit of it, was going to become another part of this neighborhood that I'll talk about in a little bit. So this opens, beautiful park. You know, the Bash Bros of Vaux and Olmsted strike again, make a really beautiful park. Egbert Veal is tossed. By the way, pretty cool name, Egbert Veal. I need to bring that name Egbert back. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, we're in Brooklyn here. Why not? You know, this is the land of, you know, kids named Comet and dogs named Charles. So, you know, it'd be nice to bring back the name Egbert. But these guys also planned a little ellipse around here, right next to the park, that is also a little crown jewel of this area. Let's look at that. Are you following me, Cam? Look at this. Whoa, whoa. Check it out, right behind me. Look at that, this is Grand Army Plaza. That's the Soldiers and Sailors Arch. It was actually created in 1892. The little sculptures came a few years later, but a really beautiful little kind of center point here on Flatbush Ave there. By the way, if you want to know more about Prospect Park, you can just watch my video on Prospect Park. So save yourself the trouble, I don't know, point to the corner or whatever. But this little area here, very beautiful, been beautified over time. Actually in 1976, the Chariot fell down from the top. So you can imagine it wasn't as pretty back then. In the 70s in New York, lots of chariots falling off of buildings back then. Not exactly the peak New York, but that's what was happening. And right here to the side, you have some of the other cultural institutions that came a little later as well. Became kind of a centerpiece here. And over there to my left, you have the statue of General Slocum. Yeah, good old General Slocum. I have talked about the General Slocum disaster in videos before. That was basically the ship that ran aground and burned in the East River in 1904, killing over 1,000 German, mostly women and children. But that's him right there, on a little horse. Kind of crazy. Yeah, sorry, that's a little dark. But you know, when you're in the neighborhood running, you can you know, with your running partner and your running club, bring that up with a running club. They're gonna love you. You'll be the cool kid in the running club. They'll be like, gosh, why do we invite Tom to these things? Jesus, he always just bums everybody out. But yeah, this is Grand Army Plaza and you know, General Slocum and Prospect Park. Let's keep it moving. We got more to cover. Don't mind me just casually hanging out. Pretty cool, chill dude. But here to tell you about some of the cultural institutions that sprouted up on this land to the east of Flatbush that was initially intended to be for the park, but here at the south end of Prospect Heights. The first of these institutions is right behind me. This is the Brooklyn Museum. This actually started out as like a circulating library in the 1820s, 1823 specifically, and then this building was built in 1897. A gorgeous Beaux-Arts building by McKim, White, very famous architectural firm you guys may have heard of. They built the original, well, the second incarnation of Madison Square Garden. They built Penn Station, the original Penn Station. They built the municipal building. You've heard of them before. But this is a very famous museum here, very pretty. You got the two statues there of Manhattan and Brooklyn, designed by Daniel Chester French, who designed the Lincoln Memorial. These statues actually used to be on the approach to the Manhattan Bridge over on the Brooklyn side back in the day, and they moved them here. Also, Audrey Munson was the model for those. She was the world's first supermodel, they say. Modeled for tons of statues around New York. But very, very impressive museum, actually. It's got actually a world-renowned collection of Egyptian artifacts, one of the biggest collections in the world. Also has the Elizabeth Sackler Center for Feminist Art. That's right, Elizabeth Sackler. You recognize that name, Cam? The Sackler family? Yeah, Elizabeth Sackler was the daughter of Arthur Sackler, who actually got rid of his shares in Purdue before they made OxyContin. So she tries to like wash her hands and be like, that wasn't me. But he did kind of start this whole idea of like pushing drugs on doctors, and also like developed Valium, the first $1 million drug, all this stuff. So, you know, his hands aren't clean. But yeah, the Sackler family, is like, if you guys don't know, they were the ones who were, Purdue Pharmaceuticals pushed OxyContin on the world, opioid epidemic. Just to give you an idea, 2022, 82,000 deaths, overdose deaths in the United States attributed to opioids. 82,000 in 1 year, that's insane. That was like 76% of all deaths that year. So to give you an idea what it was. But look at that architecture, huh? Isn't that something? Yeah, it's kind of crazy. All the museums around the city. You know, they actually got rid of the Sackler name over at the Met, and people like Nan Golden actually have been protesting it and trying to make it public, you know, what some of these people did, because they're never been held to account, man. These people have never gone to jail for pushing this stuff, knowing what it does. Don't get me started. Don't get me started. But there's a really great book called Empire of Pain about this, but you should check that out. If you like to read, which I don't know, maybe you do. All right, so this is the other part of the cultural institutions. This is actually the Brooklyn Public Library. This is the Central Library. So this is kind of like the New York Public Library Central branch or main branch, kind of a similar version. This was actually built in 1911, but this new building was actually built in Art Deco style a little later. Very pretty art. L'Exposition d'Art Décoratif. Remember that in 1925 in Paris? That's where they got the idea for it. Then it took off here in the late 1920s, early 1930s. You knew that. Oh boy, a lot of kids going to the library. They're in for a shock. It's books, kids. Oh no. Got to start them young though. Anyways, this is one of, so 21 of the 61 branches in Brooklyn of the library are Carnegie libraries. Because in 1901, Carnegie gave over $5 million to make 67 libraries across the 5 boroughs. $5 million. I mean, that wouldn't get you one Barnes & Noble today, but back then was enough to start all these libraries all over the place. And 21 here in Brooklyn are Carnegie libraries. Pretty cool. Andrew Carnegie, you know, the steel guy, Carnegie Mansion over on Fifth Avenue, and also wrote The Gospel of Wealth. For those of you guys who don't think that capitalism and money is a religion, it had its own gospel, I'll tell you that. Yeah, but in the book, he talks about how a man who dies with wealth dies disgraced. So he wanted to give his money away during his lifetime because he thought that was the right thing to do. How he got that money is another story, but he did want to make, you know, fund some cool stuff. So a lot of the Brooklyn libraries are descendants of the Carnegie libraries, and some of the actual original buildings are still around, which I've covered in other videos as well. I'm digressing, I'm rambling. All right, and the last piece of this kind of like cultural area east of Flatbush Avenue, on land that was supposed to be the original park, is Brooklyn Botanical Garden, huh? You ever been here, Cam? It's a cool place, man. 52 acres, over 14,000 types of plants. It was originally actually supposed to be only 39 acres, but this guy had actually started kind of cultivating plants and everything here in the neighborhood, and they just kind of moved everything here. It's got a little Japanese garden. The cherry blossoms come out every spring, but also it was laid out by the Olmsted Brothers firm. Yeah, Frederick Law Olmsted. This didn't come around until 1911, so Frederick Law Olmsted was a little, you know, it was a little past his time, but yeah, laid out by them. Very, very pretty little park, and come walk around and contemplate the big questions in life. Before we get too far ahead of that, this building here to my left is called the Turner Towers, and this is actually was the home and childhood home of a very famous resident of old Prospect Heights, and that is Joan Rivers. Joan Malinsky. You know who Joan Rivers is? You know who Joan Rivers is, Cam. The comedian Joan Rivers, she grew up here. She had so much plastic surgery, when she died, they donated her body to Tupperware. That was pretty good. That was a pretty good impression. And that was her joke, okay? Relax, that was her joke. All right, so if you thought it stunk, take it up with her. Anyways, she grew up here, right in Turner Towers. This is Brooklyn Botanical Garden. Let's keep it moving, man. We got more to talk about in this neighborhood. And here we are at the final piece of the neighborhood. This is kind of like the crown jewel of Prospect Heights. This is the Barkley Center. Now, the story behind the Barkley Center is kind of interesting. The land here was starting to get taken by the city through eminent domain in the early 2000s to build this whole area known as kind of Pacific Park and then and Atlantic Yards. It's 22 acres, and they took it with eminent domain to basically give over to a private company. It's not like they were building a highway or something. They gave it over to a private company, which was Forest City Ratner, a man named Bruce Ratner's company, while also getting subsidies. They were able to buy this at really cheap prices. They were the only bid, and the idea was to bring over a stadium. They were going to build a stadium and also bring a professional basketball team to Brooklyn. All right, the Brooklyn Dodgers left in 1957, super exciting. So he buys the New Jersey Nets and then brings them over to play in this new stadium that they wanted to build. He comes into money troubles, eventually sells the New Jersey Nets to Mikhail Prokhorov, who was a Russian oligarch. By the way, Russian oligarch just means they got all their like money pretty much as like a handout from the government after the collapse of the Soviet Union. He made his money off of nickel. He was basically given like the biggest nickel production in the country, became a billionaire. He buys the nets. He eventually sells them too. Today, Joe Tsai owns them. He actually owns the Liberty as well. Anyways, this is built. Problem was, one of the reasons why they were able to get through that eminent domain, why people finally said fine, was because they had promised affordable housing. 2,250 units of affordable housing spread out over 15 buildings. Only 9 buildings have been finished. They haven't even finished covering over the train yards, which are here. That was the Long Island Railroad train yards are located here. And the idea was they're going to pave over all of them, or at least cover them and be able to build on top of them. There's still 6 buildings left, and they've only built 1,374 units of affordable housing. So almost 1,000 units of affordable housing are missing. And get this, to add insult to injury, just today it was reported that the Empire Development Corporation, which is charged with enforcing these requirements, is waiving the penalties on Greenland USA, which is the company that's responsible for building those units, because May 31st, 2025 was actually the deadline, and they were supposed to be charged $2,000 per unit missing. So that would have been millions of dollars a month that they would have had to pay in penalties, and it's being completely waived by the Empire Development Corp. Go figure. You basically pitch the project to the neighborhood, say, hey, don't worry, we're kicking you out, but we're going to make affordable housing. It's all going to be great. And then when the time comes, not only are people skeptical, so they make you put in penalties, when the time comes for the penalties, they get waived. Another thing they had promised with the original idea of Atlantic Yards and all that was Frank Gehry, the famous architect, was supposed to design it, and it was all this big, beautiful thing. It was supposed to be, but he's tossed off the project shortly after it is, sold. So it's interesting how these things kind of are sold one way and packaged one way, and then they end up being something else. I don't know how this doesn't make people just furious, but I guess a lot of people don't really realize that that's what's going on. And the development that was caused by this and Atlantic Yards and all this has caused the neighborhood around it to get more expensive, and people are being able to cash in on that as well. So you have a lot of high rises going up to the north of this area, including the Brooklyn Tower, the first super tall in Brooklyn. It's fancy apartments. Looks like the Eye of Sauron should be on top of it. It looks like the most evil thing on the planet. But that's what kind of happens. So kind of a little bit of a Trojan horse, if you will, some would argue, but what can you do? You just live and learn, and you got to get the stories out there. That's a very important part of it too. So yeah, it's a Barkley Center, Flatbush Avenue, right on Flatbush Avenue, which we talked about earlier. All right, let's keep it moving, huh? Well, look at that. We finished, huh? We finished the tour of Prospect Heights. You got to know a little bit about this small little neighborhood, all the culture that is a part of it, the park. We talked about Barkley Center. We talked about Flatbush. We covered everything. So, I hope you liked it. Cam, did you learn something?
Almost too much.
Almost too much. No such thing. No such thing. That's right. But yeah, I don't know. You guys liked it? Go ahead and hit the little like and subscribe thingy now, and check out the Patreon for extra stuff, baby. Like I said, that's how this channel is going to keep growing. That's how you're going to keep seeing more videos. It's time to say goodbye. We're going to keep on going. I'm going to go to the library, check out some books. All right. Well, definitely rambling now. I'm going to get out of here. See you all later, guys. Thank you guys for making it this far. That's an accomplishment in itself. Pat yourselves on the back. You watched a video that's more than 45 seconds long. It's a big accomplishment these days. See y'all later. Sick.